it's not about who you know. It's about who knows you. And it's not about them knowing your name. It's about them knowing your name because of contributions that you've made or achievements that you've done that have been promoted by your manager to these other people who are maybe outside of your organization or higher levels of the organization. So always look for opportunities for people to know you as opposed to you knowing them.
My guest today is Anthony Lopresti. He is a principal data, AI, and automation technical sales manager here at IBM. But possibly more importantly, he is actually my manager. So yes, for those listening or watching, I have my own manager as a guest today on the podcast, but I think you're really going to enjoy it. He's a very fun guy, funny guy, has a lot of great stories. So yeah, just to kick things off, just tell us about your current role. And what I want to hear a little bit as you're kind of going through it or touch on at some point is, what do you love about what you do today?
Sure. And thank you for the opportunity to finally be on your podcast, Josh. I've been watching many of your submissions over the past year or so, and they're great. So glad to be a part of it. Thanks for inviting me. So as you mentioned, I'm a technical sales manager with IBM, covering our data, AI, and automation software portfolio. What I love about it is that I get to lead a team of 11 very talented but very diverse individuals. So we are teamed with sales reps on our accounts, so we're the technical counterpart. We're responsible for identifying, progressing, and closing sales opportunities in collaboration with our sales partners. But we're a diverse team in a number of ways. We have some folks who are less tenured in their technology journey, others that are more tenured, more experienced, not just with IBM, but with technology in general. And we also have a diverse set of skill sets. So the data, AI, and automation portfolio really represents about 6 distinct skill sets within that portfolio. So everybody comes with a different background and different perspective. Also diverse from a cultural background perspective, number of team members who were either not born in the United States or are first generation Americans. So, in our interactions with each other, we get to learn about their cultures and their backgrounds. And I always feel like I'm learning something new. So that's a great opportunity. And we're also diverse in our interests and our hobbies. And we get time to chat about those things and learn what other people are doing. I'm often amazed at some of the things people do outside of their work at IBM, and it's very interesting and very enlightening.
And I'm probably guilty of bringing some of the weirdest hobbies to the table. So maybe
I'm not sure that being an Alabama football fan is a weird hobby.
I don't know if that's a hobby. That's just a punishment sometimes. We had our time in this limelight though. All right, so we know what you do today. So if you will, maybe just give a brief history, kind of what led you from, we're kind of where you started up to how you're at today, kind of your journey through IBM and anywhere before IBM as well.
Sure. So back in 1991, when I graduated from Georgia Tech, IBM had just built the IBM Tower in Midtown Atlanta. IBM had a huge presence in Atlanta. And I thought, like many of my classmates, that I'd come out of college and I'd go to work for IBM. Didn't work out that way. I did start as a developer in a very small, 25-person-ish company, programming handheld barcode scanners and writing applications for that. Within a year, my organization recognized that not only did I have talent, technical talent, but I also had an ability to communicate effectively with our customers. They asked me to move into kind of a hybrid developer and pre-sales technical role. And from that point on, in terms of sales, I've always been in technical sales. So after I left that company, I did do a 3-year stint as a director of IT for a transportation logistics company. It was kind of FedEx for attorneys in the New York, New Jersey, and Philadelphia area. Did that for 3 years, and then I returned to a pre-sales role. Had different roles as an individual contributor or people manager or player coach in a few startups or startup-minded companies before I landed at IBM. Remember I said I thought I'd start out with IBM. almost 20 years to the day that I graduated from Georgia Tech, I joined IBM finally. So it was a long and winding
Keep your eyes
journey,
on the prize, right?
a long and winding journey. But IBM finally relented and brought me on. So and here, 7 of my 13 years have been as a technical sales manager.
And those first couple before you got into the management roles, it was just pre-sales, like essentially kind of similar to what I'm doing today, I'm assuming.
Yeah, so back then we had much more focused roles. I came in as a Cognos individual contributor pre-sales role, not having worked for Cognos before. I was not part of the Cognos acquisition, but I had Cognos skills from a previous job at one of the other companies I was with.
So obviously you've been at IBM a long time, you've been at other companies a long time, and what I want to know is I want to hear some funny stories because I know you have some funny stories to share from your journey along the way. I have other questions, I have work related questions, but before all that, I want to ask I want to hear funny stories. Some of these I may have heard before, but for people listening, they probably haven't heard them before, and because just Anthony is full of one-liners and motivational quotes and all kinds of things. But I know he has a lot of great stories too. He travels a lot, he has a lot of client interactions. So yeah, lay it on me.
All right. So drawing from my IBM experience, and this happened early on in my life here at IBM. So when you come into IBM in a sales role, you have to go through something called Global Sales School, or some variant of that. It has changed over time, but back then it was a 9-week program, mostly off-site, but 1 week was on-site. And that 1 week that you're on-site, there was probably like 100 other new IBM sellers in that program, and you work through different enablements, and you also work through different role-playing opportunities and scenarios. Now, before arriving on site, and mine was up in Poughkeepsie, New York, but before arriving on site, you were sent these 5 different sales scenarios with different products associated with it, just so you can get familiar with them before you had to do some role playing with it. And then each day, one of those scenarios was selected, and you had to go. You'd go into a room. You'd be in a team of 3 or 4. I think it was 4, and you'd go from room to room with one person in that group, in each room that you go into, doing the role play. And they would have, call takers, the people, facilitating the call as a pretend customer. We're all retired IBMers. I mean, then this is New York, so retired IBMers. The last thing they sold at IBM was the Selectric typewriter, right? But good on them coming back, helping to teach our new sellers, giving their time to do it, and they were great at it. So given these 5 scenarios ahead of time, but what we didn't know is that we were only going to do 4 of those scenarios because there was only 4 days. So you just assumed we were going to do each scenario in order that we had. We get to day 3, and it turns out day 3 is the day we're going to skip a scenario because we're only going to do 4. And I go into a room. I was not the person doing the role play. It was one of my classmates there. And we go in, and he starts the conversation with the call taker, the pretend customer. And he says, he starts off with an introduction about what he does and whatever. And the call taker interrupts and says, "That's great. I'm glad you're here. I really wanted to talk to you about your cloud solutions," which was one of our scenarios. And it was the scenario of the day. And, but my classmate didn't realize we were skipping one. And he says back to the call taker, "That's great. We're going to come back another day and talk about cloud solutions. But I called this meeting to talk about our storage solutions," which, he should have gone with the flow of the customer to begin with. But okay. And then the customer comes back and says, "But I really want to talk about cloud." And my classmate says, "No, we're going to talk about storage solutions." So me and the 2 other people in our group, where you kind of sit in the back of the room just observing, and the student can't see, and we're kind of looking at each other in kind of stunned belief, like he doesn't get it. He's doing the wrong scenario. And this goes on for 15, 20 minutes. So, and at this point, the call taker kind of leans back in his chair, and you can just see the moment in his face where he's like, "Okay, this is on. He wants to drive this in another direction. This is on." And it was just a brutal role play, and we're just sitting in stunned belief in the back of the room. Now the session ends, and the students all have to leave the room so the call taker can take their notes and do their evaluation. And but always the person that's doing the role play takes a few minutes to get out there because they got to collect all their notes and stuff. And the three of us are in the hallway looking at each other, just again stunned silence, like I can't believe what we just saw. And we'll call this guy Frank. Frank comes out of the room, and first thing I can you believe this guy trying to torpedo my call? He was trying to make me fail. And I look at him and go, Frank, we skipped the storage solution scenario. You were supposed to do the cloud solution. And you see the blood just rush out of his face. And he runs back into the room. Like literally 10 seconds later, comes back out. He gave me his ear. I failed. We're moving on. So we didn't even go back in for the evaluation. And it was just one of, in the moment when it's kind of tense and nervous, because you have to do your own role plays and everything. But just watching that unfold was a lot of fun, or was funny for us anyway.
How did your cloud solution pitch go?
It went very well. So there's always a story, right? I always turn this into a business lesson, right? When I tell you guys stories, and I guess the moral to this story is make sure you confirm your agenda with your customer before you arrive and when you arrive, and make sure you have agreement. So even though there was a mix-up here, if there had been a confirmation of the agenda, my Frank could have pivoted and turned that into a successful situation.
Right. I just think of that one Friends episode where they're trying to get the couch up the stairs and one of them just keeps yelling, pivot, pivot. I mean, that's exactly what you got to do. You get on a call, think you're going to talk about AI. They're like, hey, what about governance? Oh, all right, let's go.
An often quoted episode from that series.
Absolutely. So during your travels, I know you're at airports a lot, airplanes a lot. I mean, you got to have some kind of interesting or funny story from traveling. I feel like you're in the air more than you're on the ground. So
yeah, this isn't so much a while traveling so much as a different culture kind of situation. Previous to IBM, I worked for a French software company headquartered just outside Paris in Saint-Cloud, just across the Seine from Paris. And early on, I had to go out for 2 weeks of training. And I took the opportunity to fly my wife out for the weekend that was in between those 2 weeks. And so she flew out on Friday morning. Then we spent Saturday and Sunday sightseeing. It was her first trip to France. Did some sightseeing. Then she was going to return on Monday while I went back to work. And and I was leaving that following Tuesday. So that first day, that Saturday morning, we took the metro out to Saint-Cloud just to show her where I was working and show the the market that pops up every day. And there was a wine store across the street from my office over there, and she wanted to bring wine back from France. And this was when it was easy to travel with bottles of liquid. So we go into this wine store. She picks out like 6 bottles, but she's leaving on Monday without me, and I don't want her to have to deal with the logistics of that. So I tell the shop owner that I'm going to be back on Tuesday because I work across the street. Pay for this now. Hold on to these. I'll be back on Tuesday to pick them up. But I'm trying to do the good tourist thing, and I'm doing this in French. So in French, I say to him, I'll be back on Tuesday to pick it up. He replies in English and says, no, we're closed on Mondays. And I said, well, and back in French, that's great because I'm going to be here on Tuesday. And he comes back in English and says, no, we're closed on Mondays. We go back and forth a couple of times. By this time, a couple had walked into the shop. It was a French couple, but he speaks English. And he taps me on the shoulder and goes, you keep telling him you're going to come back on Monday. And he keeps telling you you're closed on Monday. So I thought I was saying Tuesday, but I was actually saying Monday, and I got my French all mixed up. But it all worked out in the end. So that was my Abbott and Costello moment as I travel.
Say, who's on first? I'm just trying to look. I have a couple of notes, a couple of questions I want to ask. So something that I'm personally interested in hearing is the best career advice that you've ever gotten. And also related, what do you think is the best career advice that you've given? I know you like to give out tidbits of information. We've already had one, and we're only a couple minutes in. So,
I'm going to spoil alert. The best career advice I've ever given has also been career advice I've gotten. So I'm not very innovative. I've cherry picked the good advice to share with my team and my colleagues. But there are always these
I will
kind of
consider it plagiarism. Don't worry.
like so there are always these like kind of moments. There's several of these moments that I've had in my career where it's just been something that somebody has said to me that seems inconsequential at the time, but it's kind of like stuck at that moment has occurred to me that this is a lesson that I needed to learn. I take that forward. Uh, First, my first job out of college, I was a developer, and I needed to complete the application that I was writing. I needed to buy a zip code lookup database. So this is before the prevalence of the internet and things like that. And you bought stuff like this out of the back of the computer magazine that was like 3 inches thick that you can get every month, and people were selling their wares back there. So I reached out to a company that sold a zip code database. They'd send it to you on disk, and you could integrate it into your application. It's great. So I went to Rose Collins. Shout out to Rose. She was kind of like the administrator for our software company. She handled all accounts payable, accounts receivable, shipping, all procurement, all those things. And I went to Rose and said, "Hey, Rose, I need $50. I need to buy this software, and it's going to cost $50." And Rose said, "Well, what discount are you getting?" I said, "I'm not getting a discount." And she said, "Well, did you ask for a discount?" And I said, "No, I didn't ask." She goes, "Well, Anthony, if you don't ask for something, how are you ever going to get it?" So I've generalized that in my career, not just asking for discounts from vendors, but don't assume that the person you're working with or negotiating with or is managing you, don't assume they know what you want or know what you need. Make it clear what it is you want and ask for it. It costs you nothing to ask, and you'll get what you want more times than you think. Spoiler alert, I asked the company for the discount for a discount. No, we're not discounting it. But
But
what I
yes,
did not get in discount, I earned many times in value, many times over in value as a lesson in my career.
sounds like
So
$50 well spent.
yeah. So one other thing, because I know you want to move on time, and I know you hear me say this a lot. And this is a shout out to Karen Turner, former IBMer. She's retired now, but she told me early on in my career here at IBM, she was not my manager, she was my manager's manager at the time, and she said, one thing I can tell you, she said about at IBM, but applies to many large organizations, is it's not about who you know, it's about who knows you. Okay. And it's not about them knowing your name. It's about them knowing your name because of contributions that you've made or achievements that you've done that have been promoted by your manager to these other people who are maybe outside of your organization or higher levels of the organization. So always look for opportunities for people to know you as opposed to you knowing them. And I thought that's great advice. And I don't know, we probably had 45 team meetings over the year. I probably said that 38 times
Probably.
in
I haven't
our
been
team
keeping count,
meetings.
but yeah, probably.
Plus, outside of the team meetings, I've taken that opportunity as well. So that's probably the biggest piece of advice I give to folks.
Yeah, I'm going to be honest with you that phrase goes through my head probably more than it should. I think about that like if I'm doing something at work, I'm like, okay, so who knows me? Like it's like going through my head. So you've planted that seed and it's there, and I'm sure I will tell someone else that exact same thing one day. So it's like the gift that keeps on giving. So when you think of management, what do you think makes a great manager? What are the qualities that stand out from a great manager? And kind of the flip side of that, what do you think makes a bad one? The things that you try your best to avoid, or just, in general, what you think is both good and the bad sides.
Yeah. So I think this applies to, again, many large organizations or, where you're having to where your team is, a large team. It's understanding that one size does not fit all, right? That individuals are all different. As a manager, I have identified, who on my team, requires a high touch approach while others require a more hands-on approach. And, just as important as identifying what columns those people belong in is identifying and recognizing that you'll apply those designations generally, but everybody moves between those columns at different points in their journey at different points in the year, and understanding when somebody who you categorize as not needing such a hands-on approach actually starts needing a hands-on approach at the moment. And others, that you've identified as, high touch, hands-on, being able to give them their space from time to time. So it's recognizing and being dynamic with that approach about how hands-on and hands-off you are with folks. And I'd also say that it's important that you take the approach, and I think you've probably heard me say this when folks have introduced me in meetings that you might have been in. When they introduce me as your manager, I'll often say, Josh doesn't work for me, I work for him. And if you take that approach and you get up every day and you say, what coaching do we need in our key deals, or what are today's distractions, and what's the noise of the day that I need to shield my team from so they can focus on their priorities. If you do that, then my team will be successful. And as a manager, you need your team to be successful in order for you to be successful. So you wind up being personally successful because you ensured that your team is in a position to be successful. As far as bad manager, those that focus on their personal objectives without regard to their individual team members' objectives, and trying to treat everyone as identical widgets and not, and recognizing that one size does not fit all. It's kind of the opposite of what makes good manager. So.
Yeah, it's something that I'll jump in and say, just my observation is I think you do a really good job at setting expectations and keeping those consistent. Because I think, some people I think may not even have that precedence of, but you're like, oh no, these are the things that I as a manager and then my leadership and so on and so forth. These are the things that they expect. And I feel like we as a team, like we're frequently reminded of like, this is what I expect you to do. And because this is what so-and-so is expecting to see, this is the outcome. And I just wanted to point that out because I think that's something that's good as well.
Yeah, that's important too. And some of those things are administrivia related, but still need to get done. And it seems like, I might be harping on something that's a minor point, but history shows, I've experimented. If I don't bring these things up and mention, they get pushed to the wayside by people because they get busy in their day-to-day. Plus, we constantly have turnover in the teams. We have people coming and going. It's not like it's every day, but we have. So it's important to keep that message consistent throughout the year because you don't know who's heard. Not everybody's heard it in the first team meeting, right?
What do you feel makes you proud about your job? I feel like I could come up with an answer, but I'd like to hear what you think, how you feel, what makes you proud about your job.
So I want to hear your answer. So if you want to take it offline, that's
oh,
fine.
No. I mean, I just to me, like if I think in your position, what would make me proud? And there are a lot of different potential answers, but the first thing that comes to my mind is just seeing the team be successful and happy. Well, but that's obvious.
It's related to that. And so what makes me proud is when I see members of the team grow. Right. I mentioned diversity of my team. I have some that are less tenured, some that are more tenured. It's probably a breakdown halfway down the team. And there's always that moment when I think I'm about to coach a team member about something, and they are already coming to me with the right answers to solve the problem. So it's kind of a turning point for them. Now, I'd like to say it's like a waterfall at that point, and they've turned a corner in that part of the development. But it kind of goes back and forth a little bit for a couple of iterations over things where I get surprised that they come up with the answer before I have an opportunity to coach them on that, and then before long, it's okay. This person, can stand on their own a little bit more than they had before. So, but it's that first one, it's like that, grasshopper, the student becomes the teacher moment that gives me a lot of satisfaction. So in terms of what frustrates me, it's not so much on the coaching side of things. It's on the sales part of our job. It's when I know that my team did everything they could and everything they should during a sales process or a sales cycle, and the customer's agreeing that we have the best solution, and we lose the deal for political reasons. Yep. So there's another influencer or decision maker that just had more juice than our champion. And there are colleagues of mine that are going to be listening to this, and they're going to say, "But Anthony, if your team had done everything right, you would have identified that and you would have had it off." So yes, that's there's truth in that, but there are always some situations where you're just going to get blindsided by politics that you had no way of knowing about, or it's very low chance of discovering during the process. So that's frustrating to me. I'm mostly disappointed for my team members when that happens, because as a manager, I'm the roll up of 11 people in what they do. So, individual wins and losses don't move the needle as much for me as they do for the individual that's occurring for. So that frustrates me a lot.
Yeah, and that's that's all to me is almost more painful than a deal that where it just kind of it goes awry for a completely different reason. From a technical seller and seller perspective, it's like if you have something where you've done everything right, you have the best product, but there's just some random person in that organization that just makes the deal go away for some reason. That's to me is almost worse than if someone had screwed up along the way and messed it up, because at least you can go back and go, well, at least we can learn from that. We know what not to do next time. But in that case, it's like, well, how do we learn from that?
And most often it's because some senior decision maker just leaves the company during right at the decision making process time, or something like that. A CTO leaves, and somebody with a different set of allegiances or biases comes in and flips the script at the last minute.
Something I'd like to ask you about, I'm going to flip it over to kind of use cases. So obviously that's something a lot of people want to hear about. So I like to ask people a lot of times their favorite AI use case. From an IBM perspective, we have Watson X, and we're talking about use cases all the time for all kinds of different companies, all kinds of different situations. So I would just love to hear your thoughts, and maybe you have more than one, and that's totally fine. But when you think of AI use cases, what comes to mind?
So I hear this question asked a lot of colleagues and executives, not just at IBM, but just reading articles and watching interviews, and they usually give a high-minded answer, like curing cancer or eliminating food deserts, or the like. And I'm all for those things. Don't get me wrong, but I'd like to see those things happen. But as a getting your hands dirty kind of technologist, like I am, had my roots in coding. I'm really amazed at the translation use case. And I'm not talking about human language translation, but I like that too. But from a business perspective, I'm talking about translating computer source code. So there's a ton of technical debt out there locked up in our customers' legacy code bases like COBOL. The talent for those languages is dwindling and becomes really expensive to maintain that code, maintain those applications. So the opportunity to automate the translation of all that technical debt to a modern language like Java, for example, where we have a lot more talent out there and the talent is less expensive, more ubiquitous, I think there's a huge opportunity there. And it's not just, that there's the possibility to translate. I've seen what it does. So in that area, we have Watson Code Assistant, and it's like crazy accurate. I think there's a 90+% rate of the code that's recommended from Watson Code Assistant that gets accepted as is from developers. So, you can imagine what that does to the timeline and the cost of a migration project. And being able to migrate, to these modern languages also allows you to change paradigms in architecture and things. So it has kind of a snowball effect where you're making applications cheaper to maintain, but more reliable, and you can take advantage of more modern architectures by doing so.
Yeah, and if I remember correctly, part of that process from the products you were talking about, Watson X Code Assistant, it's not like it's just converting it over to Java. I mean, there's also processes in there that are like refactoring the code, making it more efficient, writing out things where you can understand what's actually going on with that code. I mean, because you're thinking of like younger developers, they're someone who's come in, they're out of college, and you hand them these COBOL programs, are like, I don't know what in the world this thing is doing. So step one, help me understand what it's doing. And now we're going to convert to Java. So then going forward, I have that knowledge of like, oh, I now know what's doing now. And now I have the more modern code. But I mean, I think that's fantastic.
And generating comprehensive test cases to
Right.
test that new code. That's a lot of time saved, a lot of money saved.
Yeah, I was, you speak of, you're talking about, about curing cancer and all these very lofty AI use cases versus something more practical. I was a guest on a different podcast recently, and there was conversation about use cases, and I was like, you know what, something that I always think about is, I feel like a lot of companies, they want to start with the most grand thing they can possibly think of. And then there's a good chance they may fail, right? Because they're like, okay, we're going to change our entire organization in 6 months with AI. It's like, you know what? Why don't you start small, get something, help pick this one team who's struggling with XYZ and just find something that can help them or maybe help a couple of teams and just kind of build up, prove that one works and then just kind of go from there. And so, that's something that was going through my mind as you were talking is, let's find something we can quickly do, slap generative AI on it in an appropriate way, get an ROI, show its value, and then the company is like, oh, well, it's working for them. Let's improve this process. Then that becomes another snowball effect, opposed to we're going to cure cancer, right?
And Josh, this is why you're our team's Watson X subject matter expert.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, there we go.
Thank you for really understanding our solution set there and being able to articulate it. Thanks, Josh.
No, absolutely. So what advice would you give to anyone who's like, I want to get into management? What is the advice that you would have for that person?
So it goes back to Rose Collins's advice of if you don't ask for something, how are you ever going to get it? So make your intentions known to your leadership, so that your manager and your leadership can start providing opportunities for you to kind of grow into a management role. So be proactive, ask for more responsibility. For technical sales management, take on projects that demonstrate technical eminence, not just in your core technology, but maybe across brand types of things, but while also demonstrating people leadership and collaboration skills. So, and oftentimes that means being a project manager in a project. It doesn't have to be a customer project. It could be some kind of internal project that has visibility. And don't confuse project management with being overbearing and demanding. Use the opportunity to demonstrate that you can bring people together and get consensus on decisions. You don't have to make the decisions. You just need to show that you can drive a successful decision-making process. Okay. Also, I'd say distinguish yourself in your day-to-day responsibilities. For example, if you're faced with a challenge that requires your manager's involvement, go to your manager for help, but come prepared with a suggestion to solve the problem. That will demonstrate leadership qualities and a predisposition to be ready for management.
And what let's say people have maybe false expectations of management. Someone's like, they've never been in management. They're like, I want to become a manager because of XYZ. And you're like, okay, well, that's great, but there are probably some false expectations out there of someone who hasn't worked in it. What comes to your mind when you think of that? Like, oh, you think it's all going to be sunshine and roses, but in reality, these are some of the challenges that you may face, and you need to be aware of that.
Yeah. So I think the biggest challenge, at least in technical sales, I see for people becoming managers for the first time is, and it's kind of a two-headed thing. They either think that they're no longer a technologist, and it's just about managing people, and it's certainly not at a first line management level. You do have to stay close to the technology. The flip side to that is the thinking that you're still the individual contributor, and you have to have your hands dirty in everything. You need to be able to step away and let your team do what they do, because you need the time to do all that other stuff that comes along with management. That's the managing the administrivia. It's the cutting the red tape for your team. It's the understanding what the objectives are high level from the business unit and how they translate to what your team needs to do on a day-to-day basis and coach towards that. It's reducing all that noise as well. You can't do that if you're still in there doing demos every day.
Right. And I can personally attest to that. I spent 2 years in management before I came to IBM, and it was so hard when I went into that role, it was so hard to pull myself out of the day to day that I was doing, getting down in the weeds and everything. It was extremely difficult. I still did it a lot. I'm not gonna lie. Just for the team I was on, there were some projects that they needed help with, and I'm like, all right, I'll jump in there and write some SAS code and help with development. Uh, but it was very hard to make that transition. And I would have meetings with my director, and she's like, "Are you still down in the weeds?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'm still down in the weeds. Shh, don't tell anybody." And she's like, "No, I've been there. I get it." So I understand. It's hard. It's especially, some people have certain mindsets. It's hard to like kind of let go and like, oh, I trust these other people are going to do it. Especially if it was something like in your case, it was a role that you were a part of, and now you're managing that role. You're like, treat my baby respectfully. Don't don't disgrace my good name here.
Yeah, so part of the problem is it's not just that you get away from the technology a little bit, and without practice, your muscles atrophy. It's also that the technology is changing, and having to staying up to date with those changes, can be real challenging when you have all the other responsibilities as a people manager.
So do you find it difficult? You have a pretty diverse and pretty big portfolio of, when you think of, all the different technical sellers on your team and all the different products that those sellers support. Do you find it difficult to keep track of all that? Because obviously, like you said, you don't have to be down in the weeds on all those, but you do have to be aware of how all those that are available, how they all could kind of potentially fit together and fit a certain use case or situation. Do you find that to be difficult, or is it just you're just kind of used to it because you've kind of grown with these products and you have a good foundation already?
No, it's still difficult. My profile in the IBM, my role is tagged with different portfolios of products that roll up to me. So I get hit with automatic learning assignments, which is basically the accumulation of everything that my team is assigned. So, and like I said, there are 6 different kind of pillars of technology, where you, Josh, you're getting one of those, and I'm getting all 6. So I have to keep up with it that way. It's a little bit of a challenge, but at the same time, having that automatically happen is good. It keeps me paced to stay current with the technology. It's a time management nightmare, but we get it done.
Absolutely. So let's say someone walked in your house today and they gave you $500,000 and they said, you're going to start your own business.
Oof.
Yeah, you have to use it to start your own business. You can't invest this in just in Bitcoin or whatever. Like, you have to go and start your own business with this money. I'm curious, what kind of business would you start? And I did not prepare you for this question in any way. This is on the spot.
So it would definitely be, how can I use what I know about technology to solve a problem that isn't necessarily where my enablement and training has been? I see, I think if you look at all these successful tech entrepreneurs, not some of them don't have technology backgrounds. They've found a problem to solve and then learned enough of technology to help solve that problem. So I think I'd be in a good position from understanding the technology perspective, but having to understand a business landscape and find a business problem that nobody has exploited with technology to solve that problem would be where I'd go. You don't necessarily have to be the first there too, right? Avis made their made their living as being number 2. Right. It's okay to be number 2 as well, but you want to make sure you get into a space where there's plenty of room to be successful.
And I obviously, over your years at IBM, and you've touched a lot of different products in a lot of different ways, whether you were hands-on with that product or you're managing that product. And this may be a difficult question to answer, and that's totally okay if it is. But if you had to pick, this is just my favorite product, whether it's working with it or just how you've seen it be successful with clients, what would you think your favorite product is? You maybe have more than one, and that's okay, but I'm just curious. And if you want to say Cognos, that's fine. I know we have that shared love and interest in Cognos. Shout out to Cognos. And that's a perfectly fine answer too. but I'm just curious.
But I am going to say that, and it's because I have a place in my heart for applications that have a direct impact or are directly used by the business users. So I'm not saying like IT automation or application integration. They're not they're great tools, but in terms of being able to see a direct impact on the end users of the business, Cognos lays itself out there pretty well. It's not an industry specific solution. It's not a job function or business unit specific solution. You know, business analytics cuts across the entire organization. But I'm even more drawn to it today, Cognos specifically, because of the integration of AI capabilities into that. So when I was an individual contributor helping to sell Cognos, I like to say it's not my dad's Cognos anymore, but it's not my Cognos, anymore. It's not the Cognos I was selling. It has some tremendously powerful capabilities to automatically generate insight that can make an impact on the business.
Yeah, and I attended several Cognos sessions when I was at IBM Tech Exchange conference earlier this year. I mean, it's still just great stuff that's rolling out, great enhancements, and honestly, a lot of excitement in the room. And they were talking about it, a lot of people in the room, people that were champions of the product. And I don't know, I'm still a big fan, so
it's good to know.
So I'm just curious, this isn't a work-related question, but I'm just curious what you've been watching lately.
Like in terms of television and movies?
Yeah.
All right. So I'm a
You're always
little
watching
ashamed,
something. Yeah.
I'm a little ashamed to say because of just the timing of it. But I finally got around to watching and finishing Game of Thrones. I know I'm like a decade too late.
Yeah, it's okay.
And I haven't been able to participate in those conversations with colleagues for several years. But I think it was last week I finally watched the final episode of Game of Thrones. Now I'm kind of like, trying to search for my next binge-worthy opportunity. I tend to not watch things until they have, fully completed their series. I don't like to wait for the next season on things. I'm a little impatient with that. But back to Game of Thrones, I will tell you I'm a little disappointed in the way it ended. I feel like they, and this happens with a lot of series, tried to tie up a lot of loose ends all in one or two or three episodes, which would have taken like 2 seasons earlier in the season for them to play out. And I also not necessarily happy with some of those conclusions that came about. So I think I'll give House of Dragons a try, but I got to wait for it to finish out because I don't want to wait between seasons.
That may be a while. For Game of Thrones, I mean, I don't know if you know this. I've been a huge fan for many years. My license plate on my car is actually an abbreviated version of Kingslayer. So that's if that tells you anything. It's my understanding, and I could be totally wrong, but if I remember correctly, the guys who are running that show, apparently they got some offer to do some kind of Star Wars show, and my understanding is that kind of made them rush the ending, and HBO even went to them and said, "We'll give you more episodes, to do this thing," and they're kind of like, "We're just going to wrap it up and move on to the Star." And I don't, as far as I know, that Star Wars show never even came to fruition. And you can also tell when they ran out of source material. There's a very in the show, there's a turning point where you're like, oh, they're kind of just going off in their own direction. They don't have books to reference anymore. So, I'm a big fan. But anyways, I'll get back to it. So, you've shared some tips and advice as we've been chatting. Obviously it's not who you know, it's who knows you. That's one of your most quotable and best nuggets of information. What's some of your other top pieces of advice or nuggets that you like to share with people?
Those are the two that I think I reference most. Am I missing something that I bring up frequently, Josh?
I was trying to think. I mean, that's probably the top one.
I
I
mean,
would say.
I've had other kind of lesson things that I've shared with you
Right.
guys, and they're usually around a personal experience I just had, and that at the conclusion of that experience, I had kind of an epiphany. It usually happens. It's usually Disney related because, as you know, my wife and I are season pass holders at Disney World, and we go several times throughout the year. And I admire the Disney company and Walt Disney in particular for his innovation and what they call Imagineering. So I watch a lot of kind of documentary type of stuff around behind the scenes of the Walt Disney Company and Walt Disney World and things like that. I take some of those learnings and I share them with you guys and say, you know, do you think about this? Um, do you think this way in your everyday type of thing? Things like how Disney uses different paint colors in the park to hide things they don't want you to see, subliminally hide them without being able to hide them. Do you clean up your demo environment before you present in front of a customer? Do you close the 37 tabs that are open in your Chrome browser, like mine is right now, before you're presenting to a customer? Those types of things, and the way that different Disney employees, and they don't call them employees, they call them cast members, the way they approach their job as they may be playing a role during the day, but they really they take on that character. They're not just acting; they're actually taking on that character while they're in character and while they're not. So same types of lessons I like to share with you guys. My favorite part of doing those, sharing those things, I feel like, and maybe I've done it so many times that you guys are, there's a punchline coming at the end, but I feel like I'm sharing something with you guys that's interesting, that's outside of work, and it is. And then I kind of hit you with, well, here's the business lesson that I've learned from that, and I think we all need to learn from that. So I hope that's kind of a surprise at the end every time I do that now. Maybe you guys are just expecting it.
Well, I will say the first time that I experienced it, which I don't remember exactly which story it was sometime this year. I just remember being like, okay, like as it progressed, I'm like, I feel like something's happening here, but I don't know what it is. Like, is there something coming? Like, did this really happen, or is he making up a story? But then I'm like, no, I think it really happened. I'm like, is there a lesson here? Like, I didn't know what was happening at first. Then I'm like, oh, okay, and
But you did learn the lesson, right?
yeah, I was gonna say I
Just
did learn the
humor me.
lesson, and it was it's one of those things where it's like, was it a little cheesy in the moment? Sure, but did I think about it later? Yeah, so it worked. You know what I'm saying?
I'm
And
okay with
that's
that. I'll
yeah, at
take
the end of it.
cheesy if it has a lasting effect.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I think essentially that's all you want in the end, right? You want it to be stuck in someone's head. You want it to work. So I think, I think storytelling is very important. As people, we love stories, and that's something I try to think about if I'm making a video, or I've even tried to think about it for presentations. That's something I've been working on lately of like, how can I kind of make my presentation a little bit more of a story? And I think when that happens, people tend to remember it better, like, it kind of sticks out in their brain. So that's something I've personally been trying to incorporate into other avenues of life. So yeah, I think it's great. And I'm not just saying that because you're my boss. It really sticks out.
Well, part of it is because I'm your manager.
Shh, don't tell anybody. All right. So let me ask you this. We've been talking about, what you do today and kind of where you got there. But when you were a kid, what did you want to be when you grew up?
I don't even have to think twice. I was going to play second base for the New York Yankees. There was no doubt in my mind when I was a kid, when I was 9, 10, 11, 12 years old. That's what I wanted to do. And while I loved my career, and as long as it didn't change anything else about my personal life and who I met and married and the kids I had, I would still trade my 33 years in technology to have played second base for the Yankees for a decade.
Well, I mean, when you look at some of the contracts that the baseball players get, it's like, oh yeah, I do that too. They're getting crazy money.
Well, I do look back, and I actually was thinking about this weekend with some of the free agent signings that have been happening recently. Yeah, it would have been good money then, but I'd probably be jaded and frustrated now. because my playing career would have been over for a couple of decades at this point. The money back then was nowhere near the money that the minimum salary for a major leaguer is these days. So I don't know. Probably I would have probably wound up being jaded with the whole opportunity. So everything worked out the best, I'm sure.
There you go. It all happened. It all happened as it should happen.
Exactly. I mean, the Yankees would have won a few more World Series with me playing in the 90s, but for me, I'm sure it worked out better.
Yep. So I know we're going to bring this thing in for a landing. Don't want it to go on for too long, but when I have a guest on here, I always want to make sure I give them opportunity to share any final remarks or ask any questions or anything like that. So like you say on our team meetings, the floor is yours.
Yeah, I mean, we talked about different aspects of career and everything. I think one thing that should be noted too, and it seems like a throwaway comment if you're a younger professional than when you have more experience and you realize that change is constantly happening. It happens outside of your company and it forces change inside of your company. Change is always happening, and it's those that embrace change as an opportunity, as opposed to something negative, that will, they'll be the ones that'll be successful in the long run, and they'll be happier. So if you approach change, it doesn't mean that you can't have trepidation. You need to understand what this change means to you and how you leverage it, and how you can, what it is that you can do to make the most of it for your organization. But if you approach it as an opportunity, and oftentimes change is an opportunity to reinvent yourself, and we don't get a lot of those opportunities in our lives. So if you can take a chance to rebrand yourself, either because it's time to rebrand, or maybe the brand you've been building for yourself hasn't been that great, reinvent yourself, then change should be met with positivity and excitement.
I think that's great advice. Yeah. All right. Well, I think that'll do it. So thank you so much for taking time to chat with me. I know it's been a long time coming, so I think you're either going to be the last one of 2024 or the first one of 2025. So either way, it's a good place to be.
It's quite possible I'm breaking your podcast, Josh. And that
I sure hope so.
We're going to have to put it in the podcast Hall of Fame and let it live out its life this way.
Hey, I'll take it. If this is the last one because it's broken after this, then so be it. I'll go from there and figure out what I can do next. So,
again, thank you for inviting me to chat with you today, Josh. You've done a lot of these great podcasts, and the interviews have been fascinating. So thank you for including me. Yeah,
absolutely. I'm just sorry I didn't get to you a little bit sooner. I wanted to let it marinate and kind of get my groove and then bring you in. So it was intentional. It was not nothing with malice there. So let's make sure you know that.
You were just waiting for the background check to come back.
Pretty much, yeah. It's a long process. It's a long process. We got to cross all the T's, dot all the I's, so. All right. Well, I appreciate it.
Thanks, Josh.
Thank you for checking out this episode of Control Alt Story. My name is Josh Spurgeon, and I'm a watsonx technical specialist at IBM. I can also be found under the name Data Nerd Josh on various social media platforms such as YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, and LinkedIn.